Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight, we journey into the haunting world of the Moon Bog by H.P. Lovecraft, but not as you've read it before. This version has been reimagined and rewritten to heighten the suspense, sharpen the imagery, and deliver a narration that feels fresh, cinematic, and unforgettable.
Somewhere, into what dreadful and uncharted realm I cannot say, Denise Barry has vanished. I was with him on the final night he walked among men. I heard his screams when it came for him, and though the peasants and police of County Meath scoured the land for weeks, they found nothing. No trace of Barry, no trace of the others, only silence. And now, whenever the frogs sing in the swamps, or the moon hangs alone in the sky, I feel that same chill crawl across my spine. I had known Barry well in America, where fortune had smiled upon him. I congratulated him when he reclaimed his ancestral castle by the bog at Kilder, a place his forefathers once ruled, though the halls had long since rotted into ruin. He wrote to me often, describing how the gray towers rose again under his care, how ivy crept back across the stone as if centuries had folded in reverse, and how the peasants blessed him for reviving the old days with his wealth from across the sea. But blessings turned to whispers, gratitude to fear. The villagers fled, as though some ancient doom had awakened. Lonely in his vast halls, Barry summoned me. He needed a voice, a companion, someone to share the silence. It was the bog, he confessed, that poisoned everything. I arrived at Kilder beneath a summer sunset, the sky aflame with gold, the hills and groves glowing green, and the bog shimmering blue. On a distant islet, a ruin gleamed ghost-like against the fading light. Beautiful, yes, but the villagers at Balilauch had warned me. They said Kilder was cursed. And as I watched the castle turrets burn with the fire of the setting sun, I felt their words coil around me like a prophecy. Barry's motorcar met me at the station, for Kilder lies far from the railway. The villagers shrank from the driver, pale-faced, whispering when they saw I was bound for the castle. That night, after our reunion, Barry told me the truth.
The people of Kilder had fled. They whispered that Dennis Barry meant to drain the great bog, and for them that was enough. Though he loved Ireland, America had left its mark upon him. He despised the wasted beauty of the marsh, seeing only land to be opened, peat to be cut, profit to be made. Legends and superstitions stirred no fear in him. He laughed when the peasants refused to help, cursed them when they abandoned their homes, and replaced them with strangers from the north, servants, laborers, cold faces without history. And in that loneliness, Barry called for me. I too laughed when I heard the tales that had driven the villagers away. They spoke of a guardian spirit haunting the ruin on the far islet, of ghostly lights flickering when the moon was dark, of icy winds that rose on warm nights, and of pale wraiths drifting above the waters. They whispered of a city of stone buried beneath the swamp, and of a curse upon any who dared disturb the reddish morass. Old men claimed that secrets lay hidden since the plague of Partholin's children, secrets preserved by a moon goddess when the armies of Nemed swept down from Scythia in their 30 ships. Idle stories, I thought, absurd fancies. No wonder Barry dismissed them. Yet he was fascinated by antiquities and dreamed of exploring the bog once it was drained. He had often visited the white ruins on the islet, ancient, alien in shape, but too broken to reveal their past. Now the work was ready. The northern laborers would strip the forbidden bog of its moss and heather, silence the shell-paved streamlets, and choke the blue pools fringed with rushes.
That night, after Barry had spoken at length, exhaustion weighed heavy on me. A servant led me to a chamber in a lonely tower, its windows gazing out across the village, the plain, and the endless bog. By moonlight, I saw the deserted roofs, once home to peasants, now sheltering strangers from the north. The parish church stood with its ancient spire, and far across the brooding marsh, the ruin on the islet gleamed pale and spectral, like a ghost watching from the horizon. As sleep overtook me, faint sounds drifted through the night, wild, half-musical notes that stirred my blood with a strange excitement. They colored my dreams with visions more vivid than any melody. I wandered in slumber through a radiant city in a green valley where marble streets and statues, temples and villas spoke in solemn tones of forgotten Greece. At dawn, I dismissed it as fancy, yet when I told Barry of my dream, we laughed together, though my laughter was louder, for he was troubled. His laborers had overslept again. For the 6th time they rose sluggish, dazed, as though their rest had been stolen, though all had gone early to bed. That day I walked alone through the sunlit village. The workers loitered, uneasy, haunted by dreams they could not recall. When I spoke of mine, they showed no interest, until I mentioned the strange sounds I thought I had heard. Then their faces changed. They too remembered faint echoes in the night. That evening, Barry dined with me, his voice firm with resolve. In 2 days, he declared, the drainage would begin. I felt a pang of regret for the moss, the heather, the streams and pools soon to vanish. Yet stronger still was my hunger to uncover the ancient secrets buried deep within the peat.
That night, my visions of marble colonnades and haunting flutes twisted into terror. I saw a pestilence sweep across the shining city in the valley, and then an avalanche of forested slopes bury its streets in silence. Only one place remained untouched, the temple of Artemis, high upon the peak, where the moon's aged priestess lay lifeless, crowned in ivory, her silver hair gleaming beneath the cold light. I woke with a start, trembling, uncertain if I still dreamed. The piping of flutes shrilled in my ears, too vivid to be illusion. Moonlight spilled across the floor, tracing the lattice of a Gothic window, and a distant clock struck 2. I knew I was awake, yet the music persisted, wild, monotonous airs that conjured visions of fauns dancing on some forgotten mountain. Restless, I rose and paced the chamber. The flutes tormented me, driving me to the north window, though I had no desire to look upon the night. And there, in the moonlight flooding the plain, I beheld a sight no mortal could ever forget. Across the bog, to the reedy piping, a throng of figures glided in eerie silence. They swayed and reeled in a spectral revel, like some ancient rite beneath a harvest moon. The golden light, the endless plain, the shadowy dancers, and that relentless music froze me in dread. Half of them were Barry's laborers, men I believed asleep. The rest were pale, ethereal beings in white, their forms wavering, indeterminate, like naiads risen from the haunted waters of the bog. I cannot say how long I watched from that lonely turret window before terror overcame me. I collapsed into a swoon, dreamless and heavy, until the high sun of morning dragged me back to consciousness. When morning came, my first instinct was to confide in Barry, to pour out the fears and visions that had plagued me. Yet as sunlight streamed through the latticed window, I convinced myself it had all been illusion. I am prone to strange phantasms, but never weak enough to believe them real. So, instead, I questioned the laborers. They had slept late, waking sluggish and dazed, recalling nothing of the night, only vague dreams of shrill sounds. The piping haunted me. I wondered if autumn's crickets had come too soon, tormenting the night and invading men's dreams. Later, I found Barry in the library, bent over his plans for the drainage. For the first time, I felt the same unease that had driven the peasants away. A dread of disturbing the ancient bog, of unearthing secrets buried in its black depths for countless ages. I imagined horrors lying beneath the peat, and wished for some excuse to leave. I even spoke lightly of it to Barry, but his booming laugh silenced me. That evening, the sun sank in blazing splendor, painting Kilder in red and gold. The castle glowed like a beacon. Yet to me, it seemed a warning, a portent of doom. Whether the events that followed were real or illusion, I cannot say. They defy nature, defy reason. Yet the disappearances that came after were undeniable. I retired early, heavy with dread, unable to sleep in the uncanny silence of the tower. The sky was clear, but the moon had waned and would not rise until the small hours. I lay restless, thinking of Barry, of the bog, of what the morning might bring. Panic seized me. I longed to flee, to take Barry's car and escape to Ballylaw before the land itself turned against us. But before fear could drive me to action, sleep claimed me. And in that sleep, I saw once more the city in the valley, cold, lifeless, smothered beneath a shroud of monstrous shadow.
It was the shrill piping that tore me from sleep. Yet when my eyes opened, it was not the sound that struck me first. I lay with my back to the eastern window, expecting the faint glow of the waning moon to fall across the wall. Instead, a terrible radiance blazed upon the panels before me. Not moonlight, but a shaft of crimson fire, piercing and unearthly, flooding the chamber with a brilliance that seemed born of no natural source. Panic seized me. I dared not look toward the bog. Instead, I fumbled clumsily with my clothes, seized my revolver and hat, and thought only of escape. Yet terror gave way to fascination, and at last I crept to the window. The piping whined and reverberated through the castle, maddening, incessant. Across the bog, a deluge of scarlet light poured from the ruin on the far islet. But it was no ruin now. In that infernal glow, it rose majestic, undecayed, its marble columns gleaming as though a temple had thrust itself upward from the depths of antiquity. Flutes shrieked, drums thundered, and against the blazing vision I glimpsed grotesque silhouettes, dark figures leaping in a dance beyond sanity. The sight was titanic, overwhelming, unthinkable. The piping grew stronger to my left. Trembling, caught between dread and a strange ecstasy, I crossed the chamber to the northern window. There, my horror deepened. Upon the plain at the bog's edge, bathed in ghastly red light, a procession moved, beings gliding in a manner no mortal eye should ever behold, save in the most fevered nightmares. Half gliding, half drifting like phantoms, the white-clad wraiths of the bog retreated toward the still waters and the ruin on the islet. Their translucent arms swayed in unholy rhythm, guided by the detestable piping of unseen flutes. With each gesture they beckoned, and the laborers lurched after them, dog-like, blind, stumbling as if dragged by some irresistible daemon will. From the castle below, more stragglers staggered into view, weaving drunkenly across the courtyard and through the deserted village. I recognized them instantly, the servants from the north. Even the grotesque bulk of the cook, once absurd, now appeared unspeakably tragic as he joined the throng. The flutes shrieked, drums thundered from the ruin, and then the naiads reached the water. One by one, they melted into the ancient bog, vanishing beneath its surface. Their followers splashed clumsily after them, swallowed by a vortex of foul bubbles. Last of all, the cook sank heavily into the sullen pool. And then, silence. The flutes ceased, the drums fell mute, and the blinding scarlet rays snapped out, leaving the village of doom desolate beneath the pale beams of a new-risen moon. My mind collapsed into chaos. Was I mad or sane? Awake or dreaming? Only numbness spared me from breaking. I muttered prayers, absurd invocations to Artemis, Demeter, Persephone, Pluton, anything my classical youth could recall, as if words could shield me from the horror I had seen. I felt I had witnessed the death of an entire village, and knew I was alone in the castle with Dennis Barry, whose defiance had summoned this doom. As I thought of him, new terrors convulsed me. I fell to the floor, not fainting, but helpless, paralyzed. Then came the icy blast from the east window, where the moon had risen, and with it, the shrieks. They rose from the castle far below, shrieks that grew in magnitude, in quality, until they became unendurable. Even now, I faint to recall them. All I can say is this: those cries came from something I had once called a friend.
At some point in that nightmare, the cold wind and the screaming dragged me back to awareness. My next memory is of racing blindly through blackened corridors, stumbling across the courtyard and plunging into the hideous night. They found me at dawn, wandering senseless near Ballylough. Yet what shattered my mind was not the horrors I had already seen. It was two strange incidents during my flight. Incidents trivial in appearance, yet they haunt me still whenever I stand in marshland or beneath the moon. As I fled along the bog's edge, a new sound rose. Familiar, yet twisted. The stagnant waters, once lifeless, now swarmed with monstrous frogs, bloated and green, piping shrilly in tones grotesquely out of proportion to their size. They glistened in the moonlight, staring upward as if entranced. I followed the gaze of one hideous creature, and then I saw the second vision that unmade me. From the ruin on the islet to the waning moon stretched a trembling beam of pallid radiance, a spectral path with no reflection in the waters below. And upon that path, writhing upward, was a shadow, thin, contorted, struggling as though dragged by unseen demons. My fevered mind gave it shape, and in that shape I saw the unspeakable. A monstrous resemblance, a nauseating caricature, a blasphemous effigy of the man who had been Dennis Barry. And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear, told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.